Now, I didn't know about the Canadian Venture Association. I didn't know about Sunil, but when I talked to Rafi and I said, you know, I've got to get going here, somebody mentioned to me, well, you know, right at MaRS, there's a guy by the name of Sunil Sharma, so I immediately called him, and I must say that he was very, very instrumental in leading me to a lot of young venture capitalists that we've invited here, as well as helping put this thing together. So if there's another person that should be really complimented for the work of bringing this together, it should be Sunil, who was absolutely a charm to work with and a great inspiration. He's had great experience. He was working in San Diego. He was a diplomatic, had a diplomatic mission there. He was on assignment with the Canadian Intellectual Property Association and served as Canada's representative of the United Nations Intellectual Property in Geneva, and was recently elected a vice chair of a technical committee. He has served as a senior analyst before with Technology Partnerships Canada. He's got a BA in economics from the University of Victoria and a master's of industrial relations with the University of Toronto. But quite frankly, he's a dynamo. And we're delighted to have him here in Toronto, and we're delighted to have him as partners to this particular deal. My good friend, Sunil. Take over.
Thank you very much, Senator Grafstein. Just on behalf of Canada's Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade and Canada's Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, it's my pleasure to be here with you today to moderate what I think is actually one of the most important and relevant panels that we have here at this incredible summit, where we get to meet and talk to and learn from the architects of three fantastic innovation stories that have gotten their roots right here in Toronto. So as Senator Grafstein has mentioned, I'm someone who works simultaneously in different organizations. As part of Canada's diplomatic service, it affords me the privilege of representing Canada at our global network of consulates and embassies abroad. And now, on behalf of Canada's Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, it gives me an opportunity to take a unique role in telling a story, a very positive story about Canada at the moment. And essentially, Canada is understood internationally as an economy that somehow is different, that somehow, perhaps on the strength of banks or natural resources or academic excellence, or well-regulated capital markets, or most importantly, because of its people, that we've somehow outperformed in recent years. Now, what we need to do is do more of taking this message abroad and to capture that nascent global awareness of what is this new Canada. We need to convert the brand, which is Canada, and use it to attract capital, and in my opinion, in particular, risk capital. And we need to do this with an international cross-border spirit of our own, with respect to our own new and exciting companies. Which brings me to today's outstanding panel. I'm going to start with Dr. Ted Sargent, who's seated in the middle. Dr. Sargent holds the Canada Research Chair in Nanotechnology at the University of Toronto, where he also serves as the Associate Chair of Research in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. He's the founder and chief technology officer of Envisage Technologies, a venture-backed firm which produces image sensors for the mobile handset market. In 2009, he was named a fellow of the AAAS. In 2008, he was named a cost investigator. In 2005, Scientific American named him to its list of top 50 innovators. In 2003, MIT Technology Review named him to its TR35 list. His research has been published and published extensively in Nature, in Science, in Nature Nanotechnology, in Nature Materials, in Nature Photonics. He earned his PhD from the University of Toronto and his BSc from Queen's University. Now, Dr. Sargent, or Ted, I just wanted to start by asking you to talk a little bit about your most recent venture, Xagenic, which is in the diagnostic screening space. But perhaps start a little bit earlier with another venture, a current company that you're involved with, Envisage. And before you begin, I just want the audience to fully appreciate the caliber of the work that you're involved with. Because just a few weeks ago, Envisage and its quantum film technology just won the Wall Street Journal 2010 Technology Innovation Award in the semiconductor category. Quantum film is the world's first quantum dot-based material for image sensors, replacing silicon, which has enormous market potential, particularly for mobile device cameras. So with that, Ted, please give us a little perspective on your recent ventures and how you've come to create these businesses just over the past few years.
Well, thanks, Sunil. I'd be glad to. And I was just going to ask you, actually, we have a couple of slides on Xagenic. Do you want to sort of do those after we talk about
No, I think
Envisage?
it'd be great if you went into the slides right now.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, then thank you. And it looks like we're supposed to make ourselves comfortable here, so I'll sit down and I'll sit here wishing that I'd worn matching socks today. Does this go back? Yes, it does. Good. So I'm very excited to be part of Xagenic, which is a new startup company that's just emerged. In fact, it's the fruits of a collaboration between myself and Professor Shana Kelly, who's professor in the Faculty of Pharmacy and the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Toronto. And in fact, it's Professor Kelly who's the Chief Scientific Officer of Xagenic. The opportunity that Xagenic addresses is the following. We know that life, its origins, and of course, therefore, disease is fundamentally molecular. And therefore, it is all at the nanoscale. I mean, when somebody catches a cold, or when cancer emerges, or when in a hospital somebody acquires an infection, ultimately we know that the origins can be traced to the molecular. And we have tools at the moment, and we use them in hospitals and research labs to look at molecules, to look at DNA, to look at proteins, and we can do so very sensitively. But unfortunately, I can't at the moment just pick up my BlackBerry and just sort of zap you and say, do you have influenza A, or do you have a certain other type of illness? But if I could, say at the entry point into a hospital, maybe in an ambulance, that would be incredibly powerful. Instead, today, we rely on the central labs within hospitals to give us these answers. And because the workflow within hospitals, the answer sometimes comes to us a day later, 2 days later, 3 days later. And sometimes it's too late, either because the patient's in worse shape or because the patient, if it's a case of infectious disease, the patient has infected other people in the hospital. This is the story of hospital-acquired infections that kill 17,000 people in U.S. hospitals every year. So within Xagenic, we recognize that if we could bring the power of seeing molecules to the point of care, right to the patient, that we would have an opportunity to revolutionize the quality of patient care. And so what we did is we said, how are we going to build this? Let's make it as simple as possible. Let's not try to be fancy about it. Let's try to find the simplest way in which we could see genes, see them very sensitively. And Professor Kelly had this assay, which is depicted on the slides here, wherein she could see the difference between single and double-stranded DNA tethered on an electrode. And I got involved because we thought, well, we could just make a chip out of this. We could just make it into a circuit. And here's a picture of some of Xagenic's early generations of chips, which we used for sensing. Now, if you just built a simple chip like this, it actually didn't work at all. It wasn't quite that easy. And so if you just had this kind of planar electrode with the molecules on it, you wouldn't actually get a sensitive report of which molecules were present, which disease state was present. We came to recognize that what we needed to do is, since the molecules are nanometer in size scale, we needed to talk to them on the nanoscale. We needed to build electrodes that were of a commensurable dimension to the molecules we were interfacing with. And so we grew, using what we call bottom-up self-assembly, we grew electrodes that were nanostructured, that had a shape that was kind of cognate with the shape and the size of the molecule. And what we were able to do as a result of that is build a point-of-care instrument, which is depicted here, that's a little bigger at the moment than a BlackBerry. You can see it's sort of laptop size. You can carry it around with you. And just has a simple cartridge and allows us to measure the genetic composition of any sample, but including, for example, a nasal swab sample from a patient. And what's great about this is that we can go sample to answer in a couple of minutes. We can identify whether, using this instrument, we basically can now zap you, and using this instrument, we can ascertain in a very simple way, in a matter of minutes, whether, for example, a patient has one type of disease or another type of disease, or nothing at all, like different types of colds that might need antibiotics in one case, or viruses in the other case that would require a different treatment. And the data shown here are just illustrating the fact that with this instrument, only when we nanostructure it, which is where a lot of Xagenic's core IP resides, we get incredible sensitivity and specificity. So we can tell the difference between E. coli and staph, in this case actually in a urine sample, because this sample is very relevant to urinary tract infections and figuring out how to treat a urinary tract infection. So now you could imagine in the case of UTIs, just a family physician at his or her office being able to screen a patient and give them the right antibiotics rather than having a 20% chance of giving them wrong antibiotics, as happens today, simply based on essentially an immediate feedback test that they can operate in their own office. So that's Xagenic. That's something I'm very excited about now, and that Professor Kelly is working very hard as CSO. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today. She's in San Diego at the moment, but that we're very excited about, and we're also very grateful to MaRS Innovation and a number of partners that have come together in a syndicate to help us build this company in the early stages.
Thanks very much, Ted. I'll now turn to Amar Varma. Amar is the president and co-founder of two companies, Xtreme Labs and Xtreme Venture Partners. So Amar has worked extensively in the tech and investment sectors in both Canada and the United States for over 10 years. And after he served as an engineer and product and marketing roles in various Silicon Valley companies, he returned to Canada to become a venture capitalist, and he was a director at a well-known fund, Vengrowth. In 2007, he decided to combine his passions for technology and innovation and entrepreneurship, and he co-founded Toronto's Xtreme Labs, which is a leading developer of web, social media, and mobile applications. Amar, of course, is a graduate of the University of Waterloo. And Amar, I recently returned to Toronto from having lived in California for several years, and arguably the world's epicenter of global innovation. And one of the aspects of your career and your current businesses is that they currently span the Toronto-Silicon Valley divide. With regards to your venture fund, you are essentially co-located, with one managing partner in Toronto and one in the Valley. With regard to Xtreme Labs, you are certainly leveraged and connecting the Valley with respect to opportunities right here in Toronto. And I think this results in strategic advantages for you, which might be best seen in the recent acquisition of one of your portfolio companies, BumpTop, by Google in Silicon Valley. And I would argue that there are not too many Canadian venture funds that would be in a good position to engineer a deal like that for their lack of presence, understanding, and experience in Silicon Valley. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit, in addition to some information for us about Xtreme Labs and Xtreme Venture Partners, about how this co-presence has affected your business model.
Sure. So I know many of you in the audience. I think one of the things that is probably a surprise when I say this is a pretty innovative summit, pretty innovative panel. A lot of you are already involved. I see a lot of familiar faces that are either service providers to us, co-investors with us, investors in our fund. So I think we're already on the step in the right direction with the people that are in this room, and I think we just need to amplify and magnify what we're doing. To get to the point of co-location and then I'll give a bit of background on what we do. I started my career in the semiconductor business, and everything you showed me there is obsoleted everything I learned in a very short time period. So the whole point of what's happening now is if you look at companies like Twitter, Facebook, to some extent Google, and Zynga, these are companies in the tech industry that are giants that you ask yourself, and I ask myself daily, how did they get so big? What's going on? And what's very interesting is the average age working in those companies starts with a 2, and usually is under 25. And I think that's something that when I looked at it, and I'm not that much older than that age, but I was like, wow, this is really young. These are the most valuable companies in the world run by 20-year-olds.